Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and I have been fighting with my earphones and microphone for 30 minutes. I think I've got this fixed so that I'm back to my wireless headset and you should be able to hear fine. I hope this works out. I have been at doing 14-year-old travel ball all weekend, and my son actually played well. He ended up batting 500 on the tournament and closed out pitching, did really well. Proud of him. So here we go. Before I start, I wanted to show you, I don't ever show you guys my Twitter handle. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can go to @DigitalAssetBuy and you can follow me. All right. Now I found some clips this weekend. The first clip, this is from 2012. Glenn Hutchins, who is one of the advisors to the Digital Currency Group, which is an owner in Ripple. This is in 2012, the year that Ripple was founded. I believe it was 2012. It was 2012. This is the Economist magazine forum called the Button Woods Gathering I showed you in my last video. This is their 2012 gathering, okay? Listen to what he says. They're talking about, the debt problem, and this is back in 2012, and they're talking about the fiscal cliff and all that. But listen to what he says.
What
After the election, that is a critical thing that has to happen.
I mean, what exactly is the scenario that business people are worried about on this fiscal front, though? Because, it does seem like America can probably sustain a deficit for, without coming to a crunch for some years. It can print, as Larry Summers points out, you've got the power to print your own money ultimately, and interest rates are very low at the moment, so America could borrow a lot more and invest it in infrastructure and so forth. Why are business people so worried about that scenario to the extent that you feel they're not creating jobs because of it?
Well, I think there are a couple pieces to it. The first is business people understand kind of intuitively that you can't run an economic enterprise for a significant period of time that's not self-sustaining. And the idea that we can sustain ourselves by running the printing press is something that people I think business people in particular sort of scoff at, because in the long run, the exorbitant privilege associated with the reserve currency has moved from one country to another over the course of the past, and it will do that again if we don't husband and protect that privilege as opposed to abuse it. And so that's kind of, I think, big point number one is we think there's a general view that the United States as an economic enterprise should be sustainable. And by being sustainable in the past, the United States had been able to create the conditions under which American business and the American influence in the world was unrivaled by anyone.
Okay, I wanted to show you that clip so that you can see what I've been saying all along on this channel, which is, yes, these people have been printing money, but they know it's not sustainable. So since he did this video, since he was in this video, for 8 more years, they've been printing money. So if they know that it ends in disaster and they'll lose the world reserve currency status as a result of it, then the question you have to ask yourself is, what would they have done? What would they have put in motion to fix it? And I believe that is what we've been talking about for over 2 years on this channel, because we know what they put in motion to fix it. And I think we're in the end game right now. Now, I want to play you another portion of this at the 14:35 or so mark. Listen to what Glenn Hutchins says here.
It has to have a component on cost cutting, but it also has to have a revenue component. Otherwise, it won't solve.
And do you think the typical board meeting in America at the moment, there's a serious concern that the fiscal cliff, we will go over the fiscal cliff here?
There's no doubt in my mind. Talking to any one of my colleagues here, and by the way, I would not restrict that to the US. I think we're talking about, given how globally interactive the world is today, I think that's the phenomenon that happens in pretty much every firm that has a global perspective.
So I'm very optimistic that the political class understands this problem, sees it in a very similar way in terms of the problem and is prepared to reach sort of compromises. And I would encourage them to do that. And I think
That was our message. That was our
So
message.
you are
right,
thinking,
but
so you think we'll avoid the fiscal?
No, I didn't say, but there are a group of people who know more. I am not, as a friend of mine often says, I'm not licensed to practice politics. This is not something I know anything
You
about.
did that one day.
Now, policy, not politics. But there is some group of people who think we need to have a catastrophe like 2008 that forces people to act, forces people to compromise and act. What I say to that is, we already had that catastrophe. We don't need to do it again.
I would agree.
Let's learn from that and avoid it rather than go through it again. But there is some group of people who study this, who've had the experience, are closer to Washington, closer to politics. Say that's the only way we get them to act. This is why I think this effort on the part of
The only way we get them to act.
To create the conditions under which people can meet and have some degree of encouragement and or cover, however you look.
Okay. I wanted you to see that, and let me make sure I'm clear here. I am not saying that the government created the current events, but what I am saying is this, what I've shown you before. You never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. Rahm Emanuel. There's a guy who was in the White House. I think he was an advisor to Obama. Look what Perianne Boring said. Circle, who's backed by Google, tweeted this out. Perianne Boring, remember, runs the Chamber of Digital Commerce. We know that the guy that created the Digital Dollar Project, Christian Carlo, who's at the CFTC, we know that he's one of the advisors to the Chamber of Digital Commerce. We know Brad Garlinghouse spoke at one of their events this past week. Show you that in a minute. But Perianne Boring was quoted right here. The money movement. The pandemic has forced Congress to go digital, which is kind of funny because the average age is like 50 to 64 years old. It's a much older generation. They're very traditional. They're now conducting business on their smartphones. They're holding hearings remotely. They're doing things they never thought they would ever have to do. And it's highlighting the need to have strong digital critical infrastructure. She also was an intern at the White House, by the way. And then we get this from Trump. And by the way, if you hear a guitar playing in the background, it's because my 14-year-old does not know that when I close this door not to play the guitar. So he's learning to play the guitar, which I do encourage. But if you hear anything and it sounds like parts of a song, that's what it is. But I think you'll hear Trump over him. So listen to this.
Exciting things that we'll be announcing over the next 8 weeks, I would say. Things that nobody has even contemplated, thought possible. And things that we're going to get done, and we have gotten done, and we've started in most cases, but it's going to be a very exciting 8 weeks. 8 weeks, like I think, Mike, we can honestly say nobody's ever going to see 8 weeks like we're going to have, because we really have. We're taking on immigration, taking on education, we're taking on so many aspects of things that people were hopelessly tied up in knots in Congress. They've been working on some of these things for 25, 30 years. Wasn't happening. But you'll see levels of detail, and you'll see levels of thought that a lot of people believed very strongly we didn't have in this country. We're going to get things done. We're going to get things done that they've wanted to see done for a long, long time. So I think we'll start sometime on Tuesday. We'll be discussing our one plan on suburbia, but that's one of many, many different plans. Then we're going into the immigration, the world of immigration, the world of education. We're going into the world of healthcare, very complete healthcare. And we have a lot of very exciting things to discuss, but cutting of regulation, exciting.
Okay. Thought that was a very interesting video clip. Now, Mr. B, give him a follow at XRP Mr. Brian Brooks on the Community Reinvestment Act. If you go to the 20-minute mark in this podcast that he was apparently in, listen to this. This is the comptroller of the currency who used to be at Coinbase and also used to work for Steve Mnuchin at One West Bank, which became CIT Bank, which Stuart Alderati, the general counsel of Ripple, came from. if I can get this podcast to play. Let me see if I have to refresh.
Marketplace.
This. Well, shoot. Let me see if I can get to right about there. Here we go.
The marketplace. Our mission at the OCC, because we are a government regulator, is we have to care about the other 20% too, because we're here to serve all Americans, including minorities and including the least well-off among us. And we can solve that problem by allowing banks to use things that are different from the things they've traditionally used to measure credit.
Well, you mentioned blockchain and using blockchain technologies. You certainly wasted no time when you assumed the helm of the OCC, with the agency issuing a very sweeping ANPR, or basically a Q&A publicly that was asking whether or not banks should be involved in cryptocurrencies and how, which I'm sure really caused a jolt through the banking industry and turned some heads. Why was this seen as important to you? And, what role do you see for crypto in the banking system, even beyond this question of, say, credit scoring?
So first of all, I learned a lot from being involved in two different blockchain companies, one that I worked for and one that I was an advisor to early.
Was Paul's right there. He said one that I worked for, which is Coinbase, one that I was an advisor to. Let's go and look where he was an advisor. This is Brian Brooks' LinkedIn page. Look, acting comptroller of the currency. He was at Coinbase. Here's where he was an advisor. Spring Labs. I decided to go look at Spring Labs and saw a couple of interesting things. I want you to understand that this is a much bigger thing that is going on. Remember, David Schwartz worked at one of those agencies that I don't talk about on this channel. And then look at this. This is Spring Labs, where he was an advisor. All right. I'm not going to get into what Spring Labs does. They're fintech, blockchain, which is the whole point of all of this. But if you go down and start looking at the people there, look at this guy. This guy jumped off the page. David Kravitz, PhD, Director of Research. He began his career at that place where, as Senior Technical Advisor, he combined his exceptional skills in protocol and algorithm design to profoundly enhance the security posture of communications, as stated in the Certificate of Achievement awarded by the director of those letters. This is the kind of stuff that you kind of see. Now, look at who their advisors are. You can't make this stuff up, folks. That is the former chair of the FDIC. This guy was head of financial institutions at McKinsey. That is one of those organizations that just keeps popping up when you get close to Washington, D.C., you start seeing that organization as well as a handful of others. They pop up all over the place. And then you got Gary Cohen, former director of the U.S. National Economic Council. He worked for the president, folks, and he was the president and chief operating officer at Goldman Sachs. All right? I mean, these types of people are all over this. Then go down to their investors. Don't recognize anybody. Oh, recognize someone. Galaxy Digital. That's Mike Novogratz, who's an investor in Ripple. RRE Ventures. I can't remember the guy's names. I think his name's James something or other, but also an investor in Ripple. All right, let's go back to Brian Brooks. He says some more interesting things in here.
On. And one thing I learned is cryptocurrency, generally speaking, is a technology for networking computers in financial services. It is not, generally speaking, an investment product. And you have to wrap your mind around that before you can understand why it's so important for financial services. So I want to be super clear. I'm not advocating that banks should go and invest their capital in Bitcoin. I'm not advocating that at all. What I am suggesting is the fact that crypto tokens are used to induce people to devote computing power to distributed ledgers as an alternative to central banking systems is likely the same wave of future in finance that the original internet was for information technology 25 years ago. And so we need to understand that better. The beauty of distributed networks is they're more resilient, they can capture more information, and they can harness market forces better than individual centralized institutions.
You know, It's kind of interesting thinking about an agency that's not even a New Deal agency, but one founded in part to help finance the American Civil War and to see it thinking about blockchain-based solutions. What is your take on the banking side? Are they as sort of looking forward as well to these kinds of innovations? And what kind of reception is this getting?
Well, so first of all, I would say that there's enormous interest in the fintech community broadly about coming into the OCC bank charter for a whole bunch of reasons. And in fact, at the time that your listeners are hearing this, I am on the West Coast meeting with many fintech founders in various areas. Some of them loan servicers, some of them debt management systems, some of them lenders, some payment companies. So there are a lot of people.
Thought that was interesting. Some payment. He's meeting on the West Coast, in other words, in Silicon Valley, with fintech companies talking to them about getting bank charters is what he's talking about for fintech companies. All right. How about that? Now he also you heard what he said about he's not telling banks to invest in cryptocurrencies. In other words, what he described is that the value is in the protocol. That's what he was really saying. He's not going to come out and say, oh, we're telling banks to invest. This is an investment so that they can go moon and make a lot of money. That's not what it's about. The value's in the protocol, like Glenn Hutchins said. All right, let's move along. This was Michael at VAL5 Links. David Schwartz says the San Francisco startup is exploring whether it should offer decentralized financial services to its institutional partners. Quote from Dave, I think he was in a podcast or something, interviewing for Blockdown TV. We're also looking into offering other services through RippleNet, things like loans, or maybe even DeFi, maybe if DeFi grows, offering DeFi services to institutional partners. One of the unique things that Ripple has is we have our software in the transaction flow of all these financial institutions and banks, so we can develop some new product or services or even something that comes from the DeFi space, and we can offer it immediately right into the transaction flow of those institutions. You think? And then there's this also from Michael at VAL5 Links. Abra building banking solutions on Stellar blockchain, CEO Barheit says. I'm not going to go into that article. As we keep saying on this channel, XRP and Stellar are both in the game, folks. All right. Then XRP Crypto Wolf, World Bank President David Malpass talked about the following global topics for today's virtual G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting. Debt reduction, debt suspension, debt transparency, debt resolution mechanisms. You can't make this stuff up, folks. And also XRP Crypto Wolf, half of institutional focused cryptocurrency custody firms are domiciled in the United States. One potential explanation for why a larger proportion of institutional focused crypto custody companies are in the U.S. could be the client comfort and better familiarity with the rules and regulations. So that is pretty interesting. Now, XRP Bart sent me this. This is interesting. Someone asked Catherine Coley, who runs Binance.us, when Ripple ODL partner, and she said, the ball is in Ripple's court. We are already offering USD on-ramps to XRP trading, lowest fees in America, and you can send XRP and over 35 other cryptocurrencies to marketplaces all over the world. So she wants to be an XRP or Ripple ODL partner. All right, X-Men XRP sent me this article. This is interesting. Need to think about this, folks. Jamie Dimon is warning for the U.S. economy. Nobody knows what comes next. The word unprecedented is rarely used properly, Dimon said this week. This time it's being used properly. It's unprecedented what's going on around the world, and obviously the current events themselves is a main attribute. So he says in this article, nobody knows what's coming next. He's very clear about it. Now, you got to see this. You remember the Twitter hack this past week? There was a Twitter hack, for those of you that don't know, where people took over major accounts on Twitter and then they tried to act like there was a Bitcoin giveaway to try to get people to send them Bitcoin. Big, huge. They hacked like several major accounts, like Elon Musk and people like that. Says the Twitter hack was all planned. Homeland Season 7 predicted a mass Twitter hack with a message spammed to dump Bitcoin as a code word to the Russian network that had infiltrated the U.S. government. Watch this.
Tell me how this is going to work. We spoke to Davis at the NSA. They've got a back door into Twitter's base in Ireland. They slip us in there and we launch the code. Which is what exactly?
It comes out of a Twitter handle called Real Trade Tramp. Claims she's a freelance stock tipster, was fired by JP Morgan.
The account's registered to a real estate LLC in Florida called Wicker Properties.
Dante was told to follow the account, and if you saw the phrase "Darwin loves Bitcoin," sign off.
Trade Tramp is a
Wait
few
for
thousand
it, folks.
followers,
It's
mostly
coming.
there for the folksy advice. They'll see the tweet and presumably dump Bitcoin.
But the rest should reply. What about Ripple? Means they...
What? Look, and I'm going to say right now, I don't know if this video was somehow doctored. I haven't looked into it, but it sure is fascinating.
Copy. What about Ripple? Means they copy. What about Ripple? Means they copy.
What about Ripple? Means they copy.
That one got my attention this weekend. Okay, and then there was this weekend. Here we go, folks. New Creation Capital put this out. Now, just a week ago, if I had said anything bordering on, this is Bloomberg, folks. If I had said anything bordering on this, I would have been accused of being a hype artist, saying that anything like this could go on. Watch this.
With central bank stimulus weakening the dollar and gold being only about $100 short of its all-time high, a question has started to arise: can gold replace the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency? The dollar has enjoyed this status for decades, but since it detached itself from the gold standard in 1971, it's essentially consistently weakened on a macro level. Confidence in the U.S. government and the political system in the U.S. is one of the keys, and gold doesn't have that issue of a loss of confidence. But what it does have is a problem with transportability. That's why it's more likely that a currency backed in gold, or even a digital asset backed in physical gold, could potentially replace the dollar much more easily than the actual physical bar of gold could.
And there's the problem. And that was the CME Group. I'm sorry, I said Bloomberg. The CME Group put that out. The same CME Group who's an investor in Ripple and who sent Miguel Valles to work at Ripple as the head of XRP markets. Maybe you think it's a coincidence. I don't. Okay, moving along. Next, Brad Garlinghouse he did an interview. This was on the what's it called? Chamber of Digital Commerce, I think, sponsored this. Watch this.
I think just so we're all kind of operating from the same set of facts, if you will. The reason why I say I think China is ahead in some ways because, I think the U.S. is behind. And I think the most tangible example of that is when the U.S. government gave regulatory clarity to Bitcoin and Ether. This was 2 years ago now, more than 2 years ago. The director of corporate finance, Bill Hinman, gave a speech providing clarity that the SEC did not view Bitcoin and Ether as securities. It made it accessible, and so that different platforms, different exchanges, even we just saw an ad before we started from ErisX, different players to say, oh, okay, now there's clarity around that, so we can invest in that. Well, I also think that follow the blockchain and crypto world are aware that today, because of the mining control of Bitcoin and Ether in China, these are technologies controlled by China. And, I think 25 years ago, the U.S. was a leader in making the internet what it is today. But part of that came from regulatory clarity. Part of that came from the Telecom Deregulation Act in 1996. We have that opportunity in front of us now with blockchain, but I haven't seen the U.S. kind of lean into that. And instead, in a world where we see all kinds of concerns about Huawei and 5G networks, we're 3 years from now, you can imagine the exact same headlines about these next generation of payment technologies.
Well, that regulatory clarity was.
So anyway, he's still talking about how China's ahead of the U.S. Then Michelle Vandenberg sent me this from Mark Phillips. He said, this is from the interview as well. 25 years ago, the U.S. was a leader in making the internet. what it is today. And part of what was due to the regulatory clarity, we have that opportunity now with financial technology. So that's kind of what I think that was part of what we just heard. Okay. I got a good laugh this morning because XRP, the standard production, strikes again. I said hilarious. This one instantly brought up this Dumb and Dumber scene to mind. It's that scene where he trades in they're mad at each other and he trades in the dog van or whatever. And he says, just when I think you can't be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself. And that's when he got the little tiny motorcycle for them to ride on. So anyway, here's what the article was about. Skippy Garlinghouse, apparently Brad Garlinghouse this is parody, by the way, folks. Apparently Brad Garlinghouse has a brother that's been in prison. Skippy Garlinghouse spills beans about twin brother Brad in the exclusive penitentiary interview, covered in tats and donning a stone cold stare. Skippy Garlinghouse, ne'er-do-well twin brother of Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse, sat down with XRP, the Standard Productions, Sunday, reeling off a litany of scandalous, never-before-heard stories about the Silicon Valley wonderkind. Everyone thinks they know him, said Skippy in a gravelly voice that caused XRP Productions reporters to begin nervously perspiring. Ha! They don't know shit. Y'all think I'm scary? I got nothing on Bradley. The hardened criminal laid out stunning revelations over the hour-long interview, from Brad's leg-sweeping 10 years in the Cobra Cod dojo to his merciless stealing of the peanut butter manifesto from a young intern at Yahoo. This is his brother, and this is Brad. Brad and Skinny Garlinghouse, circa 2002, in the last known image of the twins together. You think he went to Harvard, said Skippy? Well, then I got a, bridge to sell you. Hope he was a Johnson County. Nope, he was a Johnson County Community College dropout. He made me forge his Harvard transcripts. Long story short, I'm the one who ends up in here. Bradley's one cold-hearted SOB. The interview sent shockwaves across the online XRP community, as many prominent members were dumbfounded by the truth surrounding the man they once respected so much. And then he's got me quoted here. I thought he was an Ivy League superstar, said popular YouTube personality, the digital asset investor. So you're telling me he's just some guy from Kansas? I thought that was great. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe and hit the like button and tell your friends and family that Skippy Garlinghouse is trying to set the record straight. Thank you for listening.